Here's a fact Australians may not be aware of. When young, listening to headphones loudly could actually contribute to the onset of dementia. Hearing loss, you see, is a little-known cause of devastating conditions like dementia, and Brisbane-based MedTech company Audeara is expanding its reach in the hope of preventing hearing damage that could bring about dementia. Now, dementia is the leading cause of death in Australian women, accounting for 12% of deaths, and the second leading cause of death for Australian men, accounting for just over 6%, according to government sources. And we also have a 2017 report published in The Lancet addressing midlife hearing loss that may actually prevent up to 9% of new dementia cases. Now, it's believed that hearing loss might result in cognitive decline through reduced cognitive stimulation. So there are further studies cited from the Sydney Memory and Aging Study that found hearing loss affects up to 74% of people aged over the age of 70. And it suggests that people with mild hearing loss are almost twice as likely to develop dementia. Now, while people with severe hearing loss are 5 times more likely to develop that dementia. Well, joining us today to discuss what is growing concern for many Australians is Audeara CEO, Dr. James Fielding. Good morning, Doctor.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thanks. Now, how is the link between loud noise and headphones and dementia made?
Well, it's a really interesting balance as we try and unpack an incredibly complex medical situation. But at its core, what we're focused on is the impact of noise disrupting parts of the brain that are really crucial to understanding the world around you. And it's impacting a brain that is already suffering from an atrophy or a shrinking. So when we talk about dementia, when we talk about Alzheimer's disease, what we're talking about are parts of the brain losing function and shutting down and stopping that stimulation which keeps the world active. You know, that top of the pops 95-year-old that's still learning to foxtrot and can speak 6 languages and do all that kind of stuff. It's keeping the brain active, it's keeping it engaged, it's keeping moving. And for people with hearing loss, that becomes harder and harder and harder, whether it be the medical consequences of a physical shrinking of different parts of the brain because they're not getting enough actual electrical stimulation, or it's the impact on other areas of the brain from decreased social functioning and social interactions, which mean that all of those areas that light up when you get a hug from a loved one or when you're on your way to Christmas lunch, whatever it may be, something that excites you and engages you and makes you feel alert and alive, hearing loss makes each of those elements trickier and trickier. And what we find is, while there's the physical side of the brain, the part that we're really passionate about, the part that we want people to be more aware of, is that social impact. It's the social isolation, the depression, drawing away from friends and family. You don't go out to the cafes as much. You find everything a bit tricky. You can't really be involved in conversation. And all of those things really impact quality of life. And that then has these flow-on effects into the much more serious medical complications down the track.
Now, how is Audeara looking to prevent hearing damage and the onset of dementia?
So our product, these headphones, which is our first product to market, uses a really interesting algorithm that we developed, which creates a relationship between what you can hear and the type of sound that's produced from these headphones. So the first time you put them on, you do a hearing check. We show you how you're hearing on a number of different frequencies. And that's step one, because most people haven't had a hearing test. Most people, if they did, it wasn't something they were particularly engaged in. Maybe they got dragged into a clinic or they're on a work site. So the first thing we do is try and get people to engage with, I can hear this very well. I can't hear this so well. So it opens up that thought process of, maybe I need to do something about this. That's part one, giving people that information that they may have never had before. And then the second step is, by tailoring the sound that comes out of the headphones, we're able to reinvigorate all of those different areas, re-engage people in a way that isn't just cranking it up to 11, making it as loud as possible and blasting all the healthy frequencies, which is what you see gradually over time. If you walk into someone's house with a hearing loss and they've got the TV up, they're listening to it on 50 and everyone else in the house wants it to be down at 20. But they simply can't hear the words, they can't engage with their entertainment, they can't get the most out of it. unless they really crank it up. So by using a tool like ours, tailored up to their individual needs, they're able to get the volume just right, accentuated in just the right areas to make sure that you can hear every word that's spoken. You can do what I'm doing now. You can be FaceTiming someone. You can be engaging in friends and family around you. You can be making phone calls. And it really cuts out that barrier that sits between around, I can't quite hear you. Can you hear me? Hang on, and my speaker's on. Wait, I need to turn it up. And you can sit down and relax at the end of an evening and actually hear what's being spoken. You're not straining to try and pick up the accents. You're not wondering what was said. And it actually becomes a relaxation and engagement tool. And so that's where we see our core value. That first one is that information and education. And then the second one is offering an experience that really gives you the best possible benefit in that situation without just cranking it up and supercharging the volume.
Now, addressing midlife hearing loss, you say that could prevent up to 9% of new dementia cases developing. Do we know how we do that? At what point do we go, well, this is damaging, this is where we need to cut it off?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting dynamic. And when you go into that Lancet report, it's an incredibly thorough and detailed read for us medicos, a couple hundred pages. It's really good. But the core of it is trying to find these relationships around what is it about the hearing loss, which is leading to the dementia. And the core of when should I take action? When should I take a positive step is as early as possible. The simple things of putting hearing protection on a young kid when they go to a sporting stadium, or if they're starting to pick up a musical instrument, encouraging people to understand about volume limited headphones and not really blasting yourself. If you're on a work site, you've always got your earplugs in, all those basics, because it's very much a use it or lose it type situation. And if you're not using that protection, you're going to start losing your hearing. And the earlier the onset of the hearing loss, the more gradually it'll decline. And people are always thinking that's a future problem. That's not my problem. That's later. Old people go deaf. That's an old person problem. But when you're 30 and you've already got the introductory signs of hearing loss, it's a real downhill slope from there, because you're going to turn it up. When you're driving the car, you're going to turn it up. When you're watching the TV, you're going to turn it up. When you're wearing your headphones to do a workout, go for a run, do a Zoom call, you're going to turn it up. And the more you turn it up, the more your hearing goes down. The more you turn it up, the more your hearing goes down. And so the earlier you can get in a positive way and start taking preventative action, the better it is. And that's what that Lancet's talking about. It's about how do we re-engage people? How do we provide a tool? If you've got some hearing loss, how early are you getting those hearing aids? How early are you re-engaging the world around you? How early are you reactivating all that stimulus that's hitting your brain? So it's really a case of as soon as you can, as soon as you're aware, as soon as you know that this is something that's going to be valuable for you, you should be taking that action and getting on with it. And that's the best thing you can do.
We've had some great public health messaging around sunscreen that, when we go back to our old age, and it builds up, and most of the damage is done when we're young.
That's right.
I imagine this is similar to our ears were originally, our hearing was to help us survive. So it was so finely tuned, we could hear little noises a long way away to keep us alive. We don't have the ability, as with our sight, for our pupils to dilate and contract to cut down the amount of light. So the only thing we can do basically is fingers in ears to mitigate some of that damage. Is that a accurate portrayal?
Yeah, that's a really good representation. And unfortunately, that protective mechanism is that ringing you get in your ears after that loud concert you went to, or the long day in the workshop and everyone sounds a bit fuzzy and you get that ringing in your ears. And that ringing is the alarm bell saying, hey, if you keep this up, I'm not going to be able to keep functioning for much longer. And so that's right. The way the pupils adapt, they open, they close, they adjust. And the way that, I started wearing glasses when I was 12, because I caught that early thing. I couldn't quite read the whiteboard down there. I'm going to take action, going to get in front of it. Don't want to miss out. It's hard to function if you can't see things properly. You may take a step back in your education. And the problem is we're about 30 years behind, like the slip, slop, slap campaign, like wearing seatbelts. I mean, it's hard to imagine that 40, 50 years ago, seatbelts were a real optional extra that only the super health conscious were utilizing. When my grandpa was working in emergency departments, people were coming through, shot through the windscreen, and you just don't see that. When I was working in emergency departments, it's different injuries. You get injuries from seatbelt. It's just society changes and it moves. And we're trying to encourage people to think about their hearing the same way they think about their vision. It's the simplest connection. It's the easiest way for people to understand. And, you know, the dorky kid 30 years ago, Four Eyes, Poindexter, all that kind of stuff, you just don't see that anymore. It's people aren't looked down upon for wearing their glasses, because it's very clear that if people aren't wearing their glasses, they're not getting the best out of the situation. They're not getting their best education. They're not able to see the movie clearly. They're not able to watch the TV. They're not able to see the kids running around. But with hearing, there's still this idea that hearing loss is something that people can't be open about, that people can't say, oh, hang on, I want to get the best out of this situation. I'm going to use this device to make sure my senses are at top notch. And something that I think with the slip, stop, slap, with seat belts, with all these things, you know, the acceptance of glasses, people wearing glasses with no lenses in them now, just because they think they're cool. And so that notion, how do we bring hearing along on that journey and make it another part of getting the most out of life? And it's something that we think can really do a lot of good long term.
Yeah, and we see now hearing checks as a regular part of infant checks, and we see the developmental delays that are heard from it. And as you mentioned before about the social isolation, we know that takes more years off life, that relational poverty, than smoking or no exercise. And if you've got hearing problems, it becomes pretty easy to be socially isolated, even within a crowd.
No, well, that's right. And like we were talking about before, you know, even if you go out, even if you are trying to engage, you know, you're kind of a bit off the mark, you know. And there are a few people that speak really well about Osher Gunsberg, for example, a very, very popular figure. He's very open about his hearing loss and very open about the impact it was having on the quality of his life. And, you know, you're out at these big events to see lots of people, friends, family, loved ones, and you just can't engage as well as you'd like. And in this world of video connectivity and people trying to engage in so much content all the time, there's that offset of, well, now we've got headphones. Oh dear, headphones are contributing to our problem because we took a bunch of loud sounds and then we plonked them as close as possible to our ears. What are we going to do to make sure that tool we were after is not actually causing more harm in the long run? And it's another one of those social connectivity pieces. I mean, we talk a lot about Zoom fatigue. We talk a lot about sitting there, and part of that is just this information overload and the volume. But a lot of people, you know, they're not getting the best possible experience. They're not looking after how to protect themselves long term.
All right, Dr. James, how do we give us a couple of tips here as parents, as adults? What should we and shouldn't we be doing? How do we get our kids? I walk past some people and I'm 10 feet away and I can hear the headphones and I think you're going to get hit by a tram on the way home because you're not going to hear it coming.
Tell you what, clip them around the ears and tell them to pull their head in and turn their music down. But it's really one of those things where if you're in an environment where you have to raise your voice to be heard, you need to think about how loud that is, and you need to think about how often you're exposing yourself to that. I think that's step one, is this awareness and education. Step two, the obvious one, if you can hear someone's music out of their headphones, they're too loud. I mean, it's designed to be a system that's crossing about 2 centimeters. There's no reason you 10 feet away should be able to hear that. So we can be looking at applying volume limits to things. Sometimes it's not prohibition, it's just control. It's saying we don't want you to stop doing things you enjoy. We want you to do them in a way that means you're not putting yourself at harm.
Well, we got rid of solariums, so I don't.
We did.
You know,
that's right. You know, we say go for a drive. We say enjoy the freedom. We say go get it, but we say don't speed because that's dangerous. Put your seatbelt on because you need to protect yourself. We provide great tools for people when it comes to hearing. I think starting early, getting people accepting the fact that protection is key if you can't be controlling the surroundings. And you really need to start normalizing that in your kids' lives. You need to start encouraging them to understand better, not louder. It's a principle that we apply for ours. You want an incredible experience. You don't want to go deaf. The two don't have to be tied together. So how do we educate? And that's make people aware of situations where they're going to be at risk, make it normal and acceptable and encourage for people to protect themselves, and then choose a device or choose a tool that is going to give you that incredible experience without putting you in harm's way.
Is it repairable? Doctor, can we lessen the impact if we've had years of the loud things? If we go, right, I'm going to wear it for a while now, where I'm not going to have it at that volume, does it come back? Is it restorative, or once it's gone, it's gone?
It's gone, I'm afraid. When it comes to pure hearing loss, the impacts are long term. So once those little hair cells which decide I can hear music here, once they fade away, that's it. So really you're focused on restoring your ability to engage around you. So the short-term stuff, you go out to a bar or a venue or loud live music and you have a really awesome time, your ears are ringing a bit. If you then look after yourself and protect, they can blunt and then restore, but once they're gone, they won't come back. So you can stun them a bit, but if you stun them too often, they give up the ghost. And so you really need to understand that taking that preventative action is going to be key. But if you do have a hearing loss, getting in earlier is going to be such a better experience. What we have is people coming into clinic 75, 80 years of age, who've waited 10 or 15 years from being told that they should do something. You've been able to hear all this sound, all this incredible clarity, all this detail, and then it gets blunt and blunt and blunt and blunt. And then all of a sudden, someone comes on the device and goes, look at all this stuff you've been missing. And it's like walking into a dark room and flicking the lights on. For some people, that's great. Now I can see everything. For other people, oh, whoa, turn the lights off. I hate this. And so those hearing aids end up in the top drawer because people don't like them. And so the earlier you start to take action, the smoother the transition and the more comfortable it'll be. It's like skipping the gym. You skip, a month of gym, fine. You don't go to the gym for 10 years and all of a sudden go in and try to do what you were doing 20 years ago. You're going to have an awful time. And it's very much the same here.
All right, well, Dr. James Fielding, CEO of Audeara, a man definitely worth listening to while you can. Hearing loss, linked to dementia, don't risk it. Thanks for your time, Doctor.
Thank you very much.